I stood on the wraparound deck of my beach house in Charleston, watching pelicans dive into the Atlantic. As the morning sun painted the water gold, the salt air filled my lungs, and I felt the familiar peace that came from owning this slice of paradise. I had bought this property 5 years ago with money I had earned managing a successful art gallery in the historic district. Every mortgage payment, every renovation, every carefully chosen piece of furniture represented my work, my vision, my independence. The house itself was a 2-story cottage with weathered blue shutters and a tin roof that sang during rainstorms. I had spent countless weekends refinishing the hardwood floors, painting the walls a soft cream, and turning the sunroom into a reading nook filled with plants. The master bedroom opened onto a balcony where I drank coffee every morning. The guest rooms upstairs could sleep 6 comfortably. The kitchen had marble countertops I had saved for months to afford. This was not just a house. This was my sanctuary, my investment, my future. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister, Vanessa. Coming to Charleston next week with Julian. Want to see the beach house finally? Been too long. I smiled despite the complicated feelings that always arose when I thought about Vanessa. We had been close as children, sharing secrets and dreams in the bedroom we split in our childhood home in Columbia. But somewhere in our 20s, a distance had grown between us. She had married Julian 3 years ago, a real estate developer who smiled too widely and spoke too loudly. I had attended their wedding in Savannah, watching my sister glow in her white dress while Julian made grand toasts about building empires together. Something about him had always unsettled me, though I could never articulate exactly what. I texted back, "Of course. When do you arrive?" "Tuesday afternoon. Julian wants to see the property. He says oceanfront real estate is always a smart investment." The phrasing bothered me, but I pushed the feeling aside. Vanessa was my sister. She wanted to visit. That was normal. That was what families did. Tuesday arrived with clear skies and gentle waves. I spent the morning cleaning, arranging fresh flowers in the living room, and preparing the guest rooms. I made shrimp and grits for dinner, knowing it was Vanessa's favorite. The house looked perfect, welcoming, ready to share. They arrived at 3 p.m. in a black SUV that seemed too large for the narrow beach road. Julian stepped out first, his polo shirt stretched tight across his expanding middle, his sunglasses reflecting the ocean. He did not greet me immediately. Instead, he walked around the property, examining the exterior walls, testing the deck railing, peering at the foundation. Vanessa emerged next, thinner than I remembered, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Daisy." She hugged me, and I caught the scent of expensive perfume mixed with something sharper, something like anxiety. "The house is beautiful. You have done so well for yourself. Thanks for coming," I said, leading them inside. "I thought we could have dinner on the deck, watch the sunset." Julian barely glanced at the interior as he walked through, his footsteps heavy on my refinished floors. He opened closets without asking, checked the water pressure in the bathrooms, examined the electrical panel in the utility room. "Good bones," he muttered. "Needs updating, but good bones." Vanessa touched my arm. "Julian is always in work mode. You know how real estate people are." I did not know, actually, but I nodded and served dinner. The meal was tense, filled with Julian dominating the conversation with stories about properties he had flipped, investments that had multiplied, deals he had closed. He talked about Charleston's booming real estate market, about oceanfront properties appreciating at unprecedented rates, about the importance of maximizing assets. "You know what this place could rent for during summer season?" he said, gesturing with his fork. "$15,000 a week. Easy. Maybe 20 during peak months. You are sitting on a gold mine, Daisy. I am not interested in renting it out," I said quietly. "This is my home." He laughed, a sound without warmth. "Your home? You live here alone? Seems like a waste of space and potential income." Vanessa placed her hand on Julian's arm. "She loves it here. Not everything is about money." But Julian's eyes had taken on a calculating gleam as he looked around the deck, the ocean beyond, the valuable square footage I occupied. I felt something shift in the air, like the pressure drop before a storm. I just did not realize how close the lightning was. The next morning, I woke to find Julian already awake, standing on the beach with his phone pressed to his ear. Through the window, I watched him pace, his free hand gesturing aggressively. Vanessa sat at the kitchen table, staring into a coffee cup I had not heard her pour. "Is everything okay?" I asked, joining her. She looked up, startled. "Fine. Julian is just stressed about a deal back in Atlanta. He works too hard." But her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the cup, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. I wanted to ask more, to bridge the distance between us, but Julian came through the sliding door before I could speak. "Vanessa, pack up," he said. "We need to head back early. Something came up with the Buckhead project. They left within an hour." Julian barely saying goodbye, Vanessa hugging me tightly and whispering, "I will call you soon." I promise. I watched the SUV disappear down the beach road and felt relief mixed with sadness. The visit had been strange, unsettling. Not at all the reconnection I had hoped for. 3 weeks passed. Vanessa sent occasional texts, always brief, always vague, busy with work. Julian has me running all over Atlanta. Miss you. But she never called, never suggested another visit, never explained the tension I had felt during those 2 days. Then, on a Friday evening in late June, I returned from the gallery to find the black SUV parked in my driveway. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, her face turned away. Julian stood on my deck, talking to a man in a suit I did not recognize. My stomach tightened with instinctive alarm. I climbed the steps quickly. Julian, what are you doing here? He turned, and his smile was all teeth, no warmth. Daisy, we need to talk. This is Bernard from Coastal Property Management. He is here to discuss the rental potential of this place. I told you I am not interested in renting, I said firmly. Why are you bringing property managers to my house without asking? Bernard looked uncomfortable, shuffling papers in his leather portfolio. Julian waved a dismissive hand. Just exploring options. You are being stubborn about a fantastic opportunity. This is my house, I repeated, heat rising in my chest. My property. My decision. Actually, Julian said, his tone shifting to something harder, colder. We need to discuss that. Vanessa emerged from the SUV then, walking slowly toward us like someone approaching an execution. Her face was pale, her eyes red. Daisy, I am so sorry. I did not know he would do this. Do what? I looked between them, fear beginning to pulse beneath my ribs. Julian pulled a folded document from his pocket. When your father passed away, he left the house in Colombia to both you and Vanessa, correct? You sold it 3 years ago. Split the proceeds 50-50. Yes, I said slowly. What does that have to do with anything? Vanessa used her portion as collateral for a business loan in my name. The loan terms included provisions about joint assets and marital property. Since you are her sister and the loan documents reference familial real estate holdings, this property technically falls under the umbrella of our financial portfolio. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the words. That is insane. This house has nothing to do with your loan. I bought it with my own money before you were even married. Read the documents, Julian said, thrusting papers at me. My lawyers have reviewed everything. There is legal precedent. This property can be considered part of the extended family asset structure that secured the loan. You are lying. I looked at Vanessa. Tell me he is lying. Tears streamed down her face. I signed papers. I did not understand what they meant. He said it was just standard loan paperwork. I did not know he would try to claim your house. Bernard cleared his throat. Mr. Julian has asked me to prepare rental agreements for this property beginning July 15th. I understand this is a family matter, so perhaps I should come back. No, Julian interrupted. We are discussing business now. Daisy, you can stay here through the summer if you pay fair market rent. After that, we will need to reassess the arrangement. The world tilted. Get out. Excuse me? Get out of my house. Now, before I call the police. Julian's expression darkened. You do not want to make this difficult. I have lawyers. I have documentation. You are a single woman running a small gallery. Do you really think you can fight me on this? Vanessa sobbed. Julian, please. This has gone too far. You said you just wanted to talk to her, to explain the situation. The situation, he said sharply, is that your sister is squatting on valuable property that legally belongs to our household now. She can accept that gracefully, or we can make it official through the courts. Her choice. I pulled out my phone. I am calling the police. Go ahead, Julian said. Tell them your brother-in-law is discussing legal documents regarding property rights. See how seriously they take that. My hand shook as I dialed. Before I could press the call button, Julian snatched the phone from my hand and threw it over the deck railing. I watched it arc through the air and disappear into the sand below. You need to understand something, Julian said, stepping closer. I own successful properties across 3 states. I have connections. I have resources. You have a mortgage you struggle to pay and a gallery that barely breaks even. This house is worth $800,000 minimum. You really think you are going to keep it? The next hour blurred into a nightmare. Julian continued his assault, alternating between pseudo-legal jargon and outright intimidation. Bernard eventually excused himself, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding. Vanessa pleaded with her husband to stop, to leave, to reconsider, but he ignored her completely. At some point, neighbors appeared on their decks, drawn by raised voices. Julian smiled and waved at them. Just a family discussion. Nothing to worry about. I felt trapped, violated, furious. This was my home, my sanctuary, my hard-earned peace, and this man was trying to steal it with fake legal documents and bullying tactics. Finally, As the sun began to set, Julian delivered his ultimatum. You have until Sunday to decide. Either you sign papers acknowledging our joint ownership and agreeing to our rental management terms, or we file formal legal claims on Monday. Your choice. He turned to Vanessa. Get in the car. She hesitated, reaching for me. Daisy, I will fix this. I promise. I will find a way. Now, Julian commanded. She followed him to the SUV, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched them drive away, my body shaking with rage and fear. When I retrieved my phone from the sand, the screen was shattered but functional. I immediately called my friend Patricia, who worked as a paralegal in Charleston. Can someone claim your property through a family member's business loan? I asked without preamble. What? No, that is not how property law works at all. Who told you that? I explained the situation in fragmented sentences. Patricia listened, her silence growing more ominous. Daisy, this is fraud, or at least attempted fraud. He is trying to scare you into signing something that would legitimize his claim. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything verbally. I am sending you the name of a real estate attorney right now. I spent the rest of the evening documenting everything. I wrote down every word Julian had said, every threat he had implied, every detail of his behavior. I took photographs of the property, found my original deed and mortgage documents, gathered proof of every payment I had made. I would not let him take my home. I refused to be bullied into surrender. Saturday morning brought a new development. I found an envelope taped to my front door. Inside were official-looking documents titled Joint Family Asset Agreement, with spaces for my signature. The language was dense, deliberately confusing, but Patricia helped me understand it over the phone. This is garbage, she said bluntly, completely unenforceable. But if you signed it, it would create a legal mess that would take months and thousands of dollars to untangle. He is betting you will sign just to avoid the fight. I am not signing. Good. Now listen carefully. I talked to my boss about your situation. He says you need to document any further contact with Julian. Record conversations if you can. South Carolina is a one-party consent state, so you are legally allowed to record without telling him. If he shows up again, call the police immediately and report him for harassment and trespassing. I felt slightly better having a plan, but anxiety still gnawed at my stomach. Julian had money, connections, confidence. I had righteous anger and a paralegal friend. Would that be enough? Sunday arrived without further contact. I spent the day in tense anticipation, jumping at every sound, checking the windows constantly. As evening approached, I began to hope Julian had reconsidered, that Vanessa had talked him down, that the nightmare was over. Then, at 8 p.m., I heard vehicles in my driveway, multiple vehicles. I looked out to see the black SUV plus a moving truck. My heart stopped. Julian emerged, followed by two large men in work clothes. Vanessa stayed in the SUV, her face buried in her hands. Julian walked up the steps and pounded on the door. Daisy, open up! We are moving in. I locked the door and stepped back. You do not live here. This is trespassing. I told you, he shouted. This house belongs to our family now. Since you refused to sign the agreement, we are taking possession. We have every legal right to be here. The two men started carrying boxes from the truck. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. Charleston Police. What is your emergency? Someone is trying to break into my home. My brother-in-law is claiming he owns my property, and he brought people to move his belongings in. I need help. The dispatcher took my address and assured me officers were on the way. I stayed on the line, narrating everything I saw through the window. Julian directed the men to stack boxes on the deck. He tried the front door, then the back sliding door. When he found everything locked, his face reddened with anger. Get out here, Daisy. Stop being childish. This house is ours now. The men looked uncomfortable, exchanging glances. One said something to Julian I could not hear. Julian pulled out his wallet, apparently offering more money. The men resumed unloading boxes. I recorded everything on my phone. Julian ranting, the men carrying furniture, Vanessa sobbing in the SUV, the sun setting over the ocean behind them. Evidence. We are moving in tonight, Julian yelled. You can leave now or leave later, but either way you are leaving. This beach house belongs to me and Vanessa. Get out. This house is ours now. He laughed then, a cruel sound that echoed across the deck. The men laughed too, caught up in their employer's confidence. Look at you hiding behind locked doors. You think that will save you? I own this place now. I pressed my face against the glass, meeting his eyes. The police are coming. His smile only widened. Good. They can help explain property rights to you. This house is ours now, Daisy. Start packing your stuff. The blue lights appeared on the beach road exactly 12 minutes after my call. 2 patrol cars pulled into the driveway, and the moving men immediately stopped working, stepping away from the boxes with raised hands. Julian's confident smile faltered for just a moment before he reconstructed it, walking toward the officers with extended hand. "Good evening, officers. Thank goodness you are here. We are having a family dispute about property ownership. My sister-in-law is refusing to acknowledge legal documents that establish our rights to this residence." The first officer, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, ignored his hand. "Who called 911? I opened the front door. "I did. I am Daisy, and I own this house. This man is my sister's husband. He has been harassing me about my property for weeks, and tonight he showed up with movers trying to force his way in." The second officer, younger and broader, scanned the scene. "Sir, do you live at this address?" "Not yet," Julian said smoothly, "but my wife and I have legal claim to this property through family asset arrangements. I have documentation in my vehicle." "Ma'am, do you live here?" the female officer asked me. "Yes. I have lived here for 5 years. I own this house. I have the deed, mortgage statements, tax records, everything. He has been trying to intimidate me into signing papers that would give him partial ownership." The officer turned back to Julian. "Do you have a key to this residence?" "Well, no, but does your name appear on the deed? Not currently, but the legal framework." "Sir, if your name is not on the deed and you do not have permission from the legal owner to be here, you are trespassing. I need you to remove your belongings from this property immediately." Julian's face reddened. "You do not understand. I have lawyers who will explain. You can explain it to them tomorrow," the officer said firmly. "Tonight you need to leave. Ma'am, do you want to press charges for trespassing?" I hesitated, looking at the SUV where Vanessa sat watching. Even through the windshield, I could see her devastation. She was a victim in this too, manipulated by a man who cared only about money and control. "I want him to leave and never come back. If he contacts me again or comes near my property, I will press charges." The officers supervised while the moving men loaded everything back into the truck. Julian protested, threatened to call his own lawyers, demanded badge numbers. The female officer remained unmoved. "Sir, if you do not comply, I will arrest you for trespassing and disturbing the peace. Your choice." As the men finished loading, Julian turned to me one last time. His expression had shifted from confident to dangerous. "This is not over. You just made a very expensive mistake." "Sir, leave now," the officer ordered. The moving truck departed first, followed by the SUV with Julian driving too fast down the beach road. Vanessa never looked back. The female officer approached me after they left. "Ma'am, I strongly recommend you get a restraining order. That man is dangerous." I have seen this kind of thing before. People who think they are entitled to property that does not belong to them, who use family connections to manipulate and intimidate. Document everything. Get a lawyer. Protect yourself. After the police left, I sat on my deck in the darkness, listening to waves crash against the shore. My hands still shook. My heart still raced. But beneath the fear and anger, something else stirred. Determination. Julian thought he could bully me into surrender because I was a single woman with limited resources. He thought I would crumble under pressure, sign away my rights to avoid conflict. He had badly miscalculated. Monday morning, I met with the attorney Patricia had recommended, a woman named Helen, who specialized in property disputes and fraud cases. I brought every document, every text message, every piece of evidence I had gathered. Helen listened carefully, taking notes, her expression growing more serious as I described Julian's behavior. "This is clear-cut harassment and attempted fraud," she said finally. "The documents he tried to get you to sign are completely fabricated. There is no legal mechanism by which your sister's business loan could give him claim to your independently owned property. He made that up, hoping you would not know better. What can we do?" "Several things. First, we file for a restraining order based on his threatening behavior and repeated trespassing. Second, we send a cease and desist letter to him and any lawyers he claims to represent him. Third, if he persists, we can pursue charges for attempted fraud and harassment. He has committed multiple crimes here, and we have police reports and your documentation to prove it." Relief flooded through me. "How much will this cost?" Helen named a figure that made my stomach clench, but she saw my reaction. "I can work with you on payment. And honestly, if we pursue this aggressively enough, we might be able to recover your legal fees from him as damages. Men like this rely on victims being too afraid or too poor to fight back. When someone actually stands up to them, they usually fold quickly." Over the next week, Helen filed the necessary paperwork. The restraining order was granted based on the police reports and my testimony. Julian was legally forbidden from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my property. The cease and desist letter went to his business address in Atlanta, with copies to every attorney whose name appeared in the fake documents he had shown me. Then came the call. I had been both dreading and anticipating. Helen reached me at the gallery on a Thursday afternoon. "Daisy, we need to talk about something that came up during research. I had my assistant pull property records on Julian's business holdings, just to understand what kind of resources he has. We found something concerning." My grip tightened on the phone. "What?" "He is in serious financial trouble. 2 of his Atlanta properties are in foreclosure. He has outstanding liens from contractors who have not been paid. There is a lawsuit from investors claiming he misrepresented property values. The man is drowning in debt and legal problems." Understanding dawned slowly. He wanted my house to liquidate. He thought if he could get control of it, he could sell it or refinance it to cover his losses. Almost certainly. And there is more. I contacted your sister through her personal cell phone, the one you gave me. I explained that I am your attorney and that what Julian did constitutes fraud. She wants to meet with us. She says she has information that could help your case. We met Vanessa at a coffee shop in downtown Charleston 2 days later, far from the beach house and far from anywhere Julian might find us. She arrived looking thinner than before, her clothes hanging loose, dark circles under her eyes more pronounced. She hugged me desperately when she saw me. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry for everything." We sat in a corner booth, and Helen pulled out a legal pad. "Vanessa, anything you tell us today is confidential. Daisy cares about you and wants to understand what happened. Can you explain how Julian convinced you to sign loan documents that referenced family property?" Vanessa's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "It started about 6 months after we got married. Julian's business was struggling, but he hid it from me. He kept saying he had big deals coming, that everything was fine. Then he started asking about my family, about what assets we had, about the money from selling our parents' house. He was so interested in the fact that Daisy owned beachfront property." "Did he ask you to contact Daisy about the house?" "Not at first. He just talked about it constantly, how valuable oceanfront real estate was, how Daisy was wasting the investment potential, how family should help family. It felt weird, but I thought he was just thinking out loud. Then about 4 months ago, he brought home papers for me to sign. He said it was standard documentation for a business loan, that banks required information about all family assets, even if they were not being used as collateral. Did you read the documents before signing?" Vanessa's tears started falling. "I tried. But the language was so complex, and Julian kept rushing me, saying we would lose the loan opportunity if I did not sign quickly. He said it was just paperwork, that it would not affect Daisy at all. I trusted him. I thought I was helping his business, helping our marriage. What happened after you signed?" Julian became obsessed with Daisy's house. He insisted we visit so he could evaluate the property. During the trip, he took photographs of everything, made notes, talked to real estate people about rental values. I started feeling sick about it, like I had made a terrible mistake. When we got home, I found copies of the loan documents in his office. I finally read them carefully. That is when I realized what the language actually meant. Helen leaned forward. What did it mean? The documents did not just reference family assets for disclosure purposes. They were written to suggest that family members had agreed to use their properties as mutual collateral for each other's debts. It was worded carefully, ambiguously, but Julian had structured it so he could argue that Daisy's house was part of the loan guarantee, even though she never signed anything. I felt cold. He deliberately set this up. The visit, the fake legal claims, everything was planned. "Yes," Vanessa sobbed, "and I helped him. I signed the papers without understanding. I trusted a man who was using me to commit fraud against my own sister." Helen made notes quickly. "Vanessa, are you willing to testify about this, to provide copies of those documents, to explain in legal proceedings exactly how Julian manipulated the situation?" She nodded vigorously. "I will do whatever it takes to fix this. I have already contacted a divorce attorney. I am leaving him. I just needed to know Daisy was safe first, that he could not hurt her anymore." We talked for another hour, Vanessa providing details about Julian's business failures, his mounting debts, his increasingly desperate schemes to generate cash. She described how he had become verbally abusive when she questioned his decisions, how he controlled all their finances, how he had isolated her from friends and family. The man she had married no longer existed, if he ever had. What remained was a desperate criminal willing to destroy anyone to save himself. Helen collected Vanessa's contact information and the names of the banks and lawyers involved in Julian's legitimate business dealings. "This is excellent information. With your testimony and these documents, we can build a case not just for defending Daisy's property, but for actively pursuing charges against Julian for fraud, forgery, and harassment. Will he go to jail? Vanessa asked quietly. Possibly. At minimum, he will face serious legal and financial consequences. He has committed multiple crimes, and we have evidence. After Vanessa left, Helen and I walked along the waterfront. The afternoon sun sparkled on the harbor, and tourists filled the streets. But I felt disconnected from the beauty around me. My sister had been victimized by a man we had both trusted. My home had been threatened. My peace had been shattered. And Julian was still out there, still dangerous, still potentially planning his next move. What happens now? I asked. Now we go on offense. I file formal complaints with the district attorney's office. We provide all the evidence, the fake documents, the police reports, Vanessa's testimony. We make it clear that Julian is a serial fraudster who targeted his own family. We make sure he faces real consequences. Will he come after me again? Not if he has any sense. He is already in legal trouble. Adding stalking and violating a restraining order to his charges would be incredibly stupid, but I will be honest, Daisy. Men like this do not always act rationally when they are cornered. You need to be careful. Consider a security system for the house. Vary your routines. Stay alert. The anxiety that had briefly lifted came rushing back. I had thought the police involvement and restraining order would end this nightmare. Instead, it seemed to be escalating into something even more serious and potentially dangerous. That night, I could not sleep in my own house. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. I finally called my friend Teresa, who owned a bed and breakfast in the historic district, and asked if I could stay in one of her rooms. She agreed immediately, hearing the fear in my voice. How long do you need it? She asked. I do not know. Until I feel safe in my own home again. I packed a bag and drove into Charleston, my beach house disappearing in the rearview mirror. For the first time since buying the property, I felt like a refugee from my own life. Julian had stolen more than just my sense of security. He had stolen my sanctuary, my peace, my confidence. Even if I won this legal battle, even if he faced consequences, would I ever feel truly safe there again? The formal complaint was filed on Monday. Helen had worked through the weekend compiling evidence, organizing testimony, building an airtight case against Julian for attempted fraud, harassment, and falsifying legal documents. The district attorney's office accepted the complaint and opened an investigation. Within days, Julian was served with notice that he was under criminal investigation. His response was immediate and volcanic. Despite the restraining order, he called my cell phone 17 times in one afternoon, leaving increasingly unhinged voice messages. You have no idea what you have done. I will destroy you. I will take everything. You are going to regret this. Helen had me save every message and file an additional complaint for violating the restraining order. Then Julian made his biggest mistake. On Wednesday evening, he drove to Charleston and went to my beach house. He did not know I was staying at the bed and breakfast. He did not know I had installed security cameras after the first police incident. He did not know I had prepared for exactly this scenario. The security system alerted my phone when motion was detected on the property. I watched the live feed as Julian's SUV pulled into my driveway at 9 p.m. He stepped out alone. No moving truck this time. No workers. Just him and his rage. He walked around the house, trying doors and windows, peering inside with his hands cupped against the glass. Then he picked up a decorative rock from my garden and threw it through the kitchen window. The alarm shrieked. I was already on the phone with the police. The man who has a restraining order against him just broke into my house. I have video footage. Please send officers immediately. This time, 4 patrol cars responded. Julian was inside my kitchen when they arrived, apparently planning to unlock the front door from the inside. The officers entered with weapons drawn and found him standing in broken glass, holding my laptop computer. He was arrested for breaking and entering, burglary, violating a restraining order, and attempted theft. The charges were serious, potentially carrying years in prison. As officers led him away in handcuffs, he screamed threats at my security camera. This is not over. You hear me, Daisy? Not over. But it was over. Helen called me 30 minutes after the arrest. He just guaranteed himself a felony conviction. With the video evidence, the prior police reports, the restraining order violation, and now breaking and entering with intent to steal, he is looking at significant prison time. The district attorney is going to prosecute this aggressively. Julian's life as he knows it is finished. I drove to the beach house after the police cleared the scene. The broken window was covered with plywood by a contractor Helen had contacted. The house was otherwise undamaged, though Julian's presence contaminated every room. I walked through slowly, reclaiming my space, reminding myself that this was still mine, still safe, still home. Over the next weeks, the full picture of Julian's crimes emerged. The investigation revealed he had attempted similar schemes with 2 other family members of business associates, pressuring them to sign documents that gave him fraudulent claims to their properties. He had forged signatures on bank applications. He had lied to investors about property values and rental income. He had built his entire real estate business on manipulation and fraud, and it was all collapsing around him. Vanessa moved in with our aunt in Colombia while her divorce proceedings moved forward. She called me every few days, apologizing repeatedly, asking if I would ever forgive her. "You were manipulated," I told her. "He is a predator. You are a victim too. We will get through this together." The criminal trial was scheduled for October. Helen was confident Julian would accept a plea deal rather than face a jury with the overwhelming evidence against him. He will probably serve 2 to 4 years, possibly more depending on what other charges get added. His real estate licenses will be revoked. His business will be liquidated to pay debts and restitution. He will have nothing left. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt exhausted. The constant stress had taken its toll. I had lost weight, sleep, joy. The gallery suffered as I struggled to focus on work. My beach house, my beloved sanctuary, felt tainted by Julian's violation. I walked the rooms wondering if I could ever feel the same peace I had felt before, but something else emerged from the wreckage: strength. I had stood up to a bully and won. I had refused to be intimidated, refused to surrender what was rightfully mine, refused to let fear control my choices. Julian had tried to steal my home, but instead, he had revealed my own resilience. I was not as fragile or helpless as he had assumed. I was not a victim to be easily manipulated. In late September, Helen called with news. Julian accepted a plea deal: 4 years in prison, 5 years probation after release, permanent revocation of all real estate licenses, and he has to pay restitution to everyone he defrauded, including your legal fees. The judge also granted a permanent restraining order. He can never contact you or come near you again. It is really over? It is really over. You won, Daisy, completely. I stood on my deck that evening, watching the sun set over the Atlantic, just as I had done hundreds of times before. The pelicans dove. The waves crashed. The salt air filled my lungs. My house stood solid and safe around me. Julian was gone, removed from my life by his own criminal actions. Vanessa was rebuilding her life with my support. I was free. But freedom came with a price. I understood now that safety was an illusion. The people you trusted could betray you, that danger could arrive in familiar faces. I understood that strength meant fighting back even when you were afraid, that justice required persistence and courage. That home was something you had to defend actively, rather than take for granted. I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it to the darkening sky. Not a toast to victory, but an acknowledgement of survival. I had weathered the storm. My house remained standing. I remained standing. That was enough. The first night I truly slept peacefully in my beach house after Julian's arrest came 3 weeks later. I woke to sunrise painting my bedroom walls gold and realized I had slept through the entire night without nightmares, without jumping at sounds, without that constant knot of anxiety in my chest. The house felt like mine again, reclaimed from the shadow Julian had cast over it. I spent October healing. The gallery required attention I had been unable to give during the crisis, and I threw myself into curating a new exhibition featuring local Charleston artists. The work grounded me, reminded me of the life I had built before Julian tried to destroy it. My regulars noticed the change in my energy, the return of my enthusiasm, though I told them nothing about what had happened. Some wounds were private. Vanessa's divorce moved forward rapidly once Julian's criminal convictions became official. His assets were seized to pay restitution and legal fees. The Atlanta properties were sold at auction. His business accounts were drained. Everything he had built through fraud and manipulation evaporated. Vanessa received nothing in the divorce settlement because there was nothing left to divide. She did not seem to care. "I just want to be free of him," she told me. "Money is not worth what I went through." She started therapy to process the emotional abuse she had endured. Her therapist explained that Julian had used classic manipulation tactics, isolating her from family, controlling finances, rushing important decisions, making her doubt her own judgment. "I thought I was going crazy," Vanessa confided during one of our phone calls. "He made me feel stupid, incompetent, like I could not function without him. Now I realize that was deliberate. He needed me vulnerable so I would do whatever he asked." "You are not stupid," I said firmly. "You are a survivor. You got out, and you are helping make sure he faces consequences. That takes incredible courage." In November, Helen called with an update that made my blood run cold. Despite Julian being safely behind bars, the investigation into Julian's business practices uncovered something else. He had been surveilling your property for months before the confrontation. He hired a private investigator to track your movements, document your routines, photograph your house and belongings. He was planning this for a long time. "Why are you telling me this now?" Because the private investigator is cooperating with prosecutors. He kept detailed records of everything Julian asked him to do, including some things that cross into stalking. Julian wanted to know when you were vulnerable, when you were alone, what your financial situation was. He was building a profile so he could exploit any weakness. I felt violated all over again. How long was this going on? At least 6 months. Starting around the time he married Vanessa. He specifically targeted you because of the beach house. This was never about family or legitimate business. This was always about stealing valuable property from someone he perceived as an easy target. The revelation transformed my understanding of everything. The friendly visit, Vanessa's discomfort, Julian's calculated inspection of my home, all of it had been reconnaissance. He had studied me like prey, looking for vulnerabilities, planning his attack. The idea made my skin crawl. What happens to the private investigator? He is testifying against Julian in exchange for immunity. His records prove premeditation, which makes Julian's crimes even more serious. The prosecutor is considering adding stalking charges to the existing convictions. Julian could end up serving additional time. I spent that evening reviewing the security footage from the night Julian broke in, watching him move around my property with the confidence of someone who had studied every detail. He knew exactly where to look, which windows might be unlocked, where I kept valuable items. The private investigator's surveillance had given him a blueprint to my life, but Julian had made one crucial miscalculation. He had assumed that knowledge of my routines and vulnerabilities meant I would be easy to defeat. He had not considered that I might fight back, that I might have friends and resources of my own, that underestimating someone did not make them weak. His arrogance had been his downfall. December brought an unexpected opportunity. The private investigator, a man named Owen, who looked ashamed every time he appeared in court, reached out through Helen asking if I would meet with him. He wants to apologize in person, Helen explained. You do not have to agree. He participated in violating your privacy, even if he is cooperating now. Curiosity 1. I met Owen at a neutral location, a park bench overlooking the harbor. He was younger than I expected, maybe 30. With the kind of face that forgot easily. He twisted his hands nervously as I sat down. I wanted to say I'm sorry. He began without preamble. What I did was wrong. I knew it was wrong while I was doing it, but I needed the money. And I told myself it was just business, just gathering information. I did not think about how it would feel to be the person being watched. Why did you agree to help him? Julian paid well, and presented everything as legitimate business research. He said you were involved in a property dispute, that he needed documentation for legal proceedings. By the time I realized he was planning something criminal, I was already implicated. I was scared. So I kept detailed records of everything, insurance in case things went bad, and they did go bad. Yes, when I heard about the break-in, I knew I had to cooperate with police. I could not have that on my conscience. I gave them everything. All my surveillance photos, all my notes, all the instructions Julian had given me. I wanted to help put him away. I studied his face, trying to determine sincerity from manipulation. He looked genuinely remorseful, but I had learned that appearances meant nothing. You violated my privacy for months. You helped a criminal plan an attack on my home and my life. An apology does not fix that. I know. I am not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I regret my part in this, and I am doing everything I can to make sure Julian faces full consequences. My testimony is going to keep him in prison longer. That is the only thing I can offer. I left the meeting feeling unsettled. Owen's cooperation had strengthened the case against Julian, which benefited me. But he had still participated in violating my privacy, still helped a predator study his target. Justice was more complicated than I had imagined, full of moral gray areas and uncomfortable alliances. The trial proceedings continued through the holidays. Julian refused to show remorse, even when facing the judge for sentencing. He maintained that he had done nothing wrong, that the property claim was legitimate, that everyone was conspiring against a successful businessman. The judge was not impressed. You systematically planned to defraud your wife's sister out of her home, the judge said during sentencing. You forged documents, made false legal claims, hired investigators to stalk her, and when those tactics failed, you broke into her home with intent to steal. You have shown no remorse, no understanding of the harm you caused, no indication that you would not do this again if given opportunity. This court finds you to be a danger to society and those around you. The final sentence totaled 6 years in prison with the additional stalking charges, followed by 10 years of probation with strict conditions. Julian's face remained impassive as the sentence was read, but I saw his hands clench into fists. He was led away without looking at anyone in the courtroom. January brought a strange new normalcy. Julian was gone. Truly and permanently removed from my life. The restraining order had been made permanent. The criminal convictions were finalized. There were no more court dates, no more legal meetings, no more looking over my shoulder waiting for the next attack. Just peace, hard-won and precious. I celebrated my 36th birthday in February with Vanessa and a small group of close friends on my deck. We ate fresh seafood and drank champagne as the sun set over the Atlantic. Vanessa gave me a framed photograph of the beach house taken at sunrise, the light making the whole structure glow. "To remind you that you won," she said, "that this place is yours, always." The gallery thrived as my attention returned fully to the work. I curated 3 successful exhibitions in spring, each one drawing larger crowds than the last. My reputation grew throughout Charleston's art community. I hired an assistant to help manage the increasing workload. The business I had built, the life I had created, flourished in the absence of Julian's shadow. But the experience had changed me in ways both obvious and subtle. I no longer took security for granted. The cameras remained installed. The alarm system stayed active. My doors stayed locked even during daylight hours. I varied my routines consciously, aware that predictability created vulnerability. I was more cautious with new people, slower to trust, quicker to recognize manipulation tactics. Vanessa noticed during one of her visits in April. "You are different now, harder somehow, but also stronger. Julian taught me that safety is something you create, not something you assume. I will not be caught off guard again." She nodded slowly. "I understand. I am different too. I question everything now, every decision, every relationship, every piece of paper someone asks me to sign. Maybe that is not a bad thing." We spent the weekend talking about everything we had learned, everything we had survived. Vanessa had started taking business classes at the community college, determined to understand finance and legal documents so she could never be manipulated again. She had reconnected with old friends Julian had driven away. She was building a new life on her own terms, and I was proud of her resilience. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked on Sunday morning as we drank coffee on the deck. "Sometimes. Not as often as I used to. Mostly I think about how close I came to losing everything because I was not prepared to defend it. That terrifies me more than Julian himself. He is gone now. 6 years is a long time. 6 years is not forever. Eventually he will get out, and men like him do not forget grudges. I need to be ready if he ever tries anything again." Vanessa set down her coffee cup. "He will not get the chance. I talked to his parole officer as part of the divorce proceedings. If Julian violates his probation in any way after release, he goes back to prison immediately. One phone call to me, one drive past your house, one attempt at contact, and he is done. He knows that. Knowledge and behavior are not always connected. He knew breaking into my house was illegal, but he did it anyway." "True. But he also knows you will fight back now. You are not the easy target he thought you were. That changes the equation." I wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that the nightmare was truly over, but some part of me would always be waiting, always watching, always prepared for the next attack. Julian had stolen my innocence about human nature, my belief that family connections meant safety, my assumption that home was an inviolable sanctuary. Those things could not be returned, no matter how much justice was served. Summer arrived with tourist crowds and gallery openings and long evenings on the beach. I dated occasionally, tentatively, still learning to trust again. None of the relationships went anywhere serious, and I was fine with that. I needed time to rediscover who I was outside the context of crisis and survival. In August, Helen called with final financial news. Julian's remaining assets have been liquidated. After paying restitution to all his victims and covering legal fees, there's about $18,000 left. It is being divided among the people he defrauded. Your share is $6,500. Not much considering what you went through, but it is something. Put it toward my legal bills. I know I still owe you money. Already taken care of. We recovered your full legal fees as part of the restitution order. This money is extra. Compensation for damages beyond legal costs. Use it for something that makes you happy. I used it to renovate the kitchen, replacing the window Julian had broken and upgrading the appliances. Every time I cooked in that space now, I thought about transformation, how something broken could become something better, how damage could be repaired, how endings could become beginnings. Vanessa completed her business courses in September and got a job with an accounting firm in Colombia. She called me, breathless with excitement. They hired me. I start next week. I will be doing bookkeeping and learning tax preparation. It is not glamorous, but it is mine. I earned it. Oh, I am so proud of you. I could not have done this without your support. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself. You showed me that fighting back was possible, that I did not have to accept being a victim. Thank you, Daisy. After we hung up, I stood on my deck watching pelicans dive for fish. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, powerful and beautiful, and sometimes dangerous. Living near it meant respecting its power while enjoying its beauty. Life worked the same way. There were threats and risks, People who would hurt you if given the chance, storms that arrived without warning, but there was also beauty and joy and peace worth fighting to protect. Julian had tried to take my home, my security, my sense of safety in the world. He had failed. Not because I was stronger than him, but because I refused to surrender. That refusal had cost me sleep and money and emotional peace, but it had also taught me something invaluable, that I could survive the worst someone could throw at me and come out intact on the other side. The fall brought one final development. Owen, the private investigator, sent a letter through Helen. In it, he explained that he had left the surveillance business and was now working in cybersecurity, helping businesses protect themselves from exactly the kind of privacy violations he had committed. He had donated money to victims' rights organizations. He was trying to make amends in whatever small ways he could. "I know I can never undo the harm I caused you," he wrote. "But I wanted you to know that your experience changed me, seeing the consequences of my actions, understanding the real human cost of what I dismissed as just business. It woke me up. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be better than the person I was when I worked for Julian. Thank you for your strength and courage. It inspired me to find my own." I did not respond to the letter, but I kept it. Not as forgiveness, but as evidence that even in the darkest situations, people could change, could grow, could choose better paths. Julian never would. His final prison letters to Vanessa before she blocked all contact were full of blame and bitterness, convinced he was the victim of conspiracy rather than the architect of his own destruction. But Owen had looked at himself honestly and found the courage to change. That mattered. November marked 1 year since Julian's arrest. I celebrated by hosting a small gathering at the beach house. Patricia and Helen and Teresa and Vanessa and a handful of other friends who had supported me through the crisis. We ate dinner on the deck as the sun set, laughing and talking about everything except the past year's nightmare. It felt good to reclaim this space for joy rather than fear. After everyone left, Vanessa lingered to help me clean up. We worked in comfortable silence, sisters rebuilding a relationship that Julian had tried to destroy. As we finished, she turned to me with serious eyes. "I need to tell you something. I have been seeing a therapist, working through everything that happened. She helped me understand something important. When Julian targeted you, he was really targeting both of us. He wanted to drive a wedge between us, to make you hate me for what he did. That was part of his strategy. Isolate his victims. Make them turn on each other instead of uniting against him. I never hated you. You were manipulated just like he tried to manipulate me. I know that now. But for months, I was terrified you would never forgive me, that I had lost my sister forever because I was stupid enough to trust a con artist. My therapist says that is exactly what Julian wanted, for both of us to be alone, wounded, unable to support each other. He failed at that too. We hugged, and I felt the last remnants of tension between us dissolve. Julian had tried to steal my property, but he had also tried to steal my family. He had failed at both. Vanessa and I were closer now than we had been in years, bonded by survival and mutual understanding. December brought news that Julian had been involved in a fight with another inmate and lost privileges for 6 months. His release date was pushed back by a year due to behavioral issues. "He is making everything worse for himself," Helen reported. "The parole board is noting every incident. He might end up serving his full sentence without early release." I felt no satisfaction in his suffering, but I did feel relief knowing he was exactly where he belonged. The criminal justice system had worked in this case. The predator had been caught, convicted, imprisoned. Not everyone was so lucky. Not every victim had the resources to fight back, the evidence to prove their case, the support system to sustain them through the battle. I had been fortunate in ways I was learning not to take for granted. The new year arrived with clarity and purpose. I expanded the gallery, taking over the adjacent storefront to showcase larger installations. I hired a second assistant and began representing more artists throughout the region. The business grew beyond anything I had imagined when I first opened 5 years earlier. Julian had wanted to destroy my life because he was failing at his own. Instead, his attacks had revealed strengths I did not know I possessed and motivated me to build something even stronger than before. Vanessa got promoted to senior bookkeeper at her firm. She started dating someone new, a teacher named Gregory, who treated her with gentleness and respect. She moved slowly, carefully, still healing from Julian's abuse, but she was moving forward, building a life based on her own choices rather than someone else's control. In March, 2 years after Julian's initial attack on my home, I stood on my deck watching another sunrise paint the sky. The pelicans dove. The waves crashed. The salt air filled my lungs. Everything was exactly as it had been before, but I was different. Stronger, wiser, more careful, but also more confident. I had faced a predator and won. I had defended what was mine and emerged victorious. My phone buzzed with a message from Helen. Final update. Julian's parole hearing was denied. He will serve his full sentence plus the additional time for behavioral violations. 8 years total now. Thought you would want to know. 8 years. By the time Julian was released, I would be 43. Vanessa would be 41. We would both be entirely different people, our lives transformed in ways impossible to predict. Julian would emerge into a world that had moved on without him, a broken man with nothing left of the empire he had tried to build on fraud and manipulation. I thought about all the things that would happen in 8 years, the relationships I would build, the art I would showcase, the life I would create. Julian would spend that time in a cell, his freedom stripped away by his own criminal choices. Every day he spent behind bars was a day I spent free, safe, building something beautiful. The revenge I had sought was not dramatic or violent. It was simply this: living well, prospering, thriving while he faced the consequences of his actions. Justice had been served not through personal vengeance but through a system that actually worked, supported by people who cared enough to help, sustained by my own refusal to be victimized. I raised my coffee cup to the sunrise, a private acknowledgement of survival and strength. Julian had tried to take everything from me and ended up losing everything himself. That was not revenge I had orchestrated. That was simply the natural consequence of his own choices catching up with him. Julian served every day of his 8-year sentence in a medium security facility, where his attempts to manipulate other inmates and guards earned him repeated disciplinary actions and solitary confinement. His real estate licenses were permanently revoked across 3 states. The properties he had fraudulently obtained were seized and sold, the proceeds distributed to the victims he had defrauded. His business reputation was destroyed beyond repair, his name synonymous with fraud in Atlanta real estate circles. Upon release, he was deported to a halfway house with strict probation conditions that forbade him from working in real estate, contacting any previous victims, or owning property for 10 years. He found work washing dishes at a diner, his grandiose dreams reduced to minimum wage reality. Vanessa's divorce was finalized while he was still in prison, and she received confirmation that he could never contact her again. The restraining order against me was made permanent, and Julian knew that one violation would send him immediately back to prison. He had gambled everything on stealing my home, and lost not just the gamble, but his entire life. Every single day he faced the consequences of underestimating a woman he thought would be easy prey. I still live in my beach house in Charleston, watching sunrises from my deck and running a successful gallery that represents dozens of artists throughout the Southeast. The cameras remain installed, the security system stays active, but I sleep peacefully knowing I defended what was mine and emerged stronger from the battle. Sometimes I think about how close I came to losing everything, and I am grateful for every moment of peace I reclaimed. Looking back at my revenge journey, I realize it was never really about revenge at all. It was about refusing to be broken, standing firm when someone tried to steal my life, and discovering that I was far stronger than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. That knowledge is worth more than any property, more valuable than any victory, the truest treasure I gained from surviving Julian's assault on my world.